Hello, everyone. I see them all populating in here. I'm going to wait a second. They are all connecting to audio. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our program tonight. Welcome back to the eBell. If you've been here 100 times, welcome for the first time. It's great to have you all here tonight for our special guest. Just a few reminders. We're going to get started in a few minutes, but if you can remain on mute during the program, it will help with background noise. This program is also being recorded and it will be available to members on our membership portal in a few days. And then finally, if your camera is off and you would like it on, because we like to see as many people as possible, you can unmute and I will help you get your camera on. I will ask you to start your video. If not, just sit tight. We're going to start in a few minutes. I'm going to let a few more people in and I'm glad you're here.
Hi, Georgianne. She's muted. Georgianne?
Yes.
Jenna,
hello.
do you and Jenna, have you ever met? Jenna, this is Georgianne Irvine. Georgianne's the sister of our immediate past president. I don't see your sister on here yet, but
I don't see
Georgianne
her
works for the
either.
San Diego Zoo.
Ah,
Please come in.
Yeah. My sister told me you were going to be on, and so she sent me the link and told me to be sure to sign up. So I'm excited to hear you speak.
Oh, awesome. So glad.
you sound
Georgianne
like
writes-
Ginger.
Georgianne writes books for the San Diego Zoo
Oh.
on the animals.
There they are behind me.
Wow.
You have worked there for quite some time, I believe, right, Georgianne?
Oh, yes. 43 years and counting.
She's quite the celebrity at the zoo.
Well, I don't know about that, but I've really enjoyed speaking to the eBell Club at times, so it's fun.
Hey, hello again, everyone. Just one or two more minutes. We have a few people still coming in. Welcome to the eBell program. A few reminders: if you can remain on mute during the program, it will help with any background noise. This program is being recorded and will be available on our membership portal in a few days. And finally, oh, I didn't mention this before. Questions? Any questions for our speaker? Please put them directly into the chat, and we'll try to get to all of them. And then if you have your camera off and you want it on, I'm here to help you. Please unmute now and I will help you with that. So one more minute and then we'll get started. Welcome back. Okay, here we go. Again, one more reminder to stay on mute during the program. Questions into the chat and we'll get to all of them. We are recording and it will be available on our website. And now to get started, I would like to welcome our president, Patricia Lombard. Patty, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Meredith. Hello and welcome. My name is Patty Lombard. It's my honor to serve as the 64th president of the eBell and my pleasure to welcome you to our virtual program. For those of you who are new to the eBell, we are a women's club founded 126 years ago by a handful of women to educate women. Today, our mission has evolved to host social and cultural events that inspire and empower women. We award scholarships to students and provide grants to charities that help at-risk women and children in the Los Angeles community. Nearly 16 months ago, the pandemic mandated the closure of our historic Wilshire Boulevard clubhouse. Shortly thereafter, we pivoted all of our programming and events online. Alas, I am only virtually in our lovely library, as you can see in the background, but we are super excited because we will be heading back soon into the building. We are delighted that you are here and welcome you to learn more about the eBell. New members are always welcome. Our dues are very reasonable. You get access to all these wonderful programs as part of the NB, and you're part of the eBell community and help support our mission. We'll send you some more information in a follow-up email, and you can, follow up if you're interested. Our director of membership is also on the program, and you'll get to hear from Aretha in a little bit. But first, it's my pleasure to introduce our board director of programs, Phyllis Hansen, who, along with her committee, develops our fabulous roster of programs. Phyllis is going to get us started, and then maybe she'll be back at the end to give you a short preview of some upcoming events.
Hi, everyone. It's very exciting to learn about giraffe tonight. So I am just very pleased that Jenna Stacy-Dawes is with us tonight. I know this is going to be a great program because I have heard her speak about the giraffe previously, and I was very inspired, so I knew I had to bring her here so you could hear it too. So my co-chair for this event, Aretha Green, who also happens to be our director of membership, has also spent time in Kenya and many other African nations. And I want her to tell you a little bit about her experience. And then I'll be back to introduce Jenna. Aretha?
Thank you, Phyllis. Hello, everyone. My first trip to the continent of Africa was in November of 2010. And it was with Safari K, who's on the Zoom call this evening. And it's great to see you, Kay. And she took a small group, intimate group of us to South Africa. And that was my first introduction to the continent. When we went on safari, I immediately fell in love with the giraffe. I found the giraffe to be elegant, just stately, just beautiful, everything that I just thought of a woman, just the way a giraffe moves, the movement. I've since been able to go back to the continent a number of times, which I'm very fortunate to have gone to Zambia, to Tanzania, and to Kenya. When I was in Kenya, in Nairobi, I was able to go to the Giraffe Center there, which is a conservation park for giraffes. And you're able to feed the giraffes, get up close. And so I really want to encourage everyone on this call this evening to explore Africa, to see it. It's not a scary place. It's beautiful, and you will fall in love with the country, the continent, as well as the animals there. So Phyllis, I'll take it back to you.
Thanks, Aretha. Okay, Jenna Stacy-Dawes has made 9 trips to Kenya and 2 trips to Uganda and Namibia. And she spends 2 to 4 weeks on each trip working with the giraffe on her. But I also, in the reason that she does this is she serves for the San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance, which is a collaborative community and consortium and a research effort to save these animals. And her particular area is she's a researcher in population sustainability, specializing in the reticulated giraffe. It's a species that's only found in northern Kenya. And she works in research and conservation in partnership with the Kenya Wildlife Service. She focuses on the socioeconomic methods and designing and implementing her research. Her background is community-based conservation, spatial ecology, and geographic information systems. So I hope she is going to explain what all these fancy specialties are. She has a bachelor's degree in zoology from Cal State Polytechnic, a master's in biology from the University of Miami Advanced Inquiry Program, and another master's degree in environmental geographical information science through Unity College. She is a member of the IUCN SSC, the Giraffe and Okapi Specialist Group. So with all these credentials, I think you'll find her a very approachable and interesting and down to earth and down to Kenyan earth person. Jenna?
Thanks, Phyllis. Well, thank you all for having me. I'm super excited to talk about giraffe. Sometimes I just keep going, so I'll try and make sure I don't talk your ear off tonight. But hopefully there's just a lot of amazing pictures of giraffe. So if you get tired of me talking, you can just look at them. But I will share my screen and start sharing this presentation with you all. Perfect. So as Phyllis said, I work for San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance. I work in population sustainability, which is a division of our research center, and I work mainly on the Twiga Walinzi initiative, which is a project that's really focused on conserving reticulated giraffe in northern Kenya. So that's what I'll be focusing on tonight. And when most people hear that I work on a giraffe program, kind of the main or the first question I get is why. A lot of people are really confused at why are you conserving giraffe? Why are you researching giraffe? And unfortunately, like a lot of other species like rhinos or elephants or polar bears, we just don't hear that much about giraffe, but their populations are facing really drastic declines, really similar to those other species and sometimes even greater. So we've kind of termed them the forgotten megafauna, and I said that they're going through this silent extinction that unfortunately, until a few years ago, not many people knew about. But already we estimate that their populations have declined by around 40% in just the past 30 years, and they've already gone extinct from about 7 African countries. So recent population estimates think there's around about 100,000 individuals. Some good news though is some surveys show there could be around 115,000. So populations do seem to be increasing, not further declining, but they aren't at the levels that they used to be. And so in 2018, giraffe as a species were actually uplisted on the IUCN Red List from least concern to vulnerable to extinction. And so that was kind of alarming for a lot of people and really drew attention to the plight that's faced giraffe populations. So working with partners, we've actually kind of realized that their distribution across Africa is really fragmented and has declined really drastically. So we estimate that it's about an 89% decline from their historical distribution in about the 1700s to what it is now. So on this map, that light kind of orange color is where giraffe were found in sub-Saharan Africa historically. And those dark brown polygons are where they're currently found today. And so you can see it's really drastic. It's a really kind of fragmented population. And that's what's really scary is if you look at, especially in the north, kind of near Nigeria, Niger, and South Sudan, these populations are all really, really scattered and fragmented and kind of these isolated populations, which makes breeding and conservation a real challenge. And throughout their range, that's kind of what we're seeing is really small, disjointed island populations forming. So why is this occurring? Why are giraffe disappearing? Like a lot of what we see in California or across the world as human populations and urban centers expand, we're losing really critical habitat. And so these large megafauna like giraffe, like elephants, like rhinos, they just don't have anywhere to go. We're kind of pushing them into smaller and smaller spaces. And as Aretha probably saw when she went to Nairobi, this is an amazing example, this picture of kind of the really crazy juxtaposition of a giraffe that we think of being wild in the savannah with Nairobi city center in the backdrop. So that's one of the, I think, most alarming images that I've seen is you're driving down a freeway and there's a giraffe or an elephant. And it's just because we're encroaching so much onto this habitat that they just don't have anywhere else to go. And coupled with that, we see a lot of land degradation. So as we're kind of seeing again in California and all across the world, as the land is kind of more used for human exploitation, we're degrading it to a point where it's not a valuable resource for animals anymore. And really large bodied animals, I keep referencing elephants, rhinos, giraffe, because they're really large bodied animals, but they need a lot to survive, a lot of nutrition. And so as we degrade the landscape a little bit further, they're kind of lacking those nutritional needs that the landscape once gave them. And so in this picture, this is actually a really traditional boma that you would see in Kenya. It's really traditional for pastoral societies, which I'll explain in a bit more depth later. But just as you can see, those little white dots are sheep. And so as you increase the livestock numbers, they feed on the landscape and compete with wildlife for food, or as we mine the landscape for minerals, cut it down for logging, we're really kind of degrading the landscape of its traditional value. And then unfortunately, just like a lot of other species, giraffe are poached throughout Africa. And one of the main reasons for this is for cultural uses. Sometimes their tail can be used for feeding or for ornamental reasons. But what we see in our study sites in northern Kenya is mainly for subsistence hunting. So if you're thinking about it, if you're trying to feed your kids that are really hungry, and a large animal that is pretty not dangerous, isn't going to hurt you, but could feed your family for a week, walks by, you might kill it for meat. And so that's a lot of what we see in northern Kenya. So I'll kind of explain more about how we're working with local communities to kind of address these problems and then figure out what we can do to kind of alter these habits. So I've been talking a lot about Kenya, and the reason why our work is focused in Kenya and why you may see Kenya pop up a lot if you hear about giraffe is because it's the only country where we have 3 distinct species of giraffe. And this is actually another whole nother topic that you could go on for a really long time about. But in 2016, they actually did a lot of research that proved that there's actually 4 distinct species of giraffe. So previously it was thought that there was just 1 species and 9 subspecies, but with a lot of genetic analyses, a lot of samples from the field, they determined that there's actually 4 distinct species of giraffe. If you look though on anything online, you'll still see the 1 species and 9 subspecies, just because it has to go through a lot of paperwork, a lot of processes to make sure it's approved. But another paper just came out this year that did again show there is pretty distinct delineation between 4 species. So in the next few years, there might actually be an official relisting of giraffe populations. But what that means for Kenya is it would have 3 distinct species of giraffes. We would have reticulated giraffe, which is the species I work most with, as well as Nubian giraffe, and then Maasai giraffe. So reticulated giraffe are really found kind of in the northern rangelands of Kenya. Nubian giraffe are shown by these really small little orange polygons. They're found in really, really disjointed populations. There's only about 800 left in Kenya. And then Maasai giraffe, which are most of the ones that you see when you're looking at like Kilimanjaro or pictures from the Masai Mara. Those are the giraffe that are found there. And this is just a fun little graphic that I like to show to kind of show the distinction between these 3 species. But as a disclaimer, it is really hard to tell giraffe species apart by their coat patterns. So these are perfect pictures, perfect examples of what they should look like. But I've been in the field in Kenya, in northern Kenya, where we absolutely know it's just reticulated giraffe. And I swear it looks exactly like a Maasai giraffe. So while these pictures and these kind of little tricks are helpful, sometimes the giraffe just decide to look like whatever they want. But to the right, this picture shows a Nubian giraffe, and how we kind of characterize them is they have these distinct brown patches, a lighter background, and then kind of, we call them white stockings. So the patterning stops at the knees. So that's a little bit of a trick to kind of tell them apart. And then the middle giraffe here is a Maasai giraffe. And I kind of like to say that they have really blotchy pattern. They kind of look like oak leaves. They're really jagged, not those sharp, crisp blotches like we see in the other species. And then we have reticulated giraffe, which I am biased because I've worked with those closely, but I think they're the prettiest. They have their really kind of stark white background against those really pretty brown patches.
Jenna, this is Aretha. There's a question in the chat about what about the Rothschild giraffe?
So that's a great question. So under the previous listing, Rothschild's giraffe were a subspecies of giraffe. They would now kind of be lumped in with Nubian giraffe. So the populations in Kenya that were previously Rothschild giraffe are considered Nubian giraffe. They didn't show enough of a genetic distinction to be their own species. However, under a new listing and under a new IUCN classification, Nubian giraffe, which is where the Rothschild giraffe would fall, would still be considered critically endangered. So it doesn't change their listing, but they weren't considered a completely separate species anymore. So, and I can share Giraffe Conservation Foundation, who is a really close partner of ours on this project. They're the ones kind of leading these whole genetic studies, and they have amazing information on what kind of genetic analyses were used to determine the species, as well as how kind of the previous species listings and populations fit into the new 4 species. And I also think I forgot to mention that the 4th species is southern giraffe. So those would be the ones found in Namibia, South Africa, and into Botswana. But reticulated giraffe, which is the giraffe pictured here, they are actually listed as endangered now. So in 2018, they were listed as endangered on the IUCN Red List, and which is kind of what drew a lot of attention to needing to conserve those populations. So I've talked a lot about kind of what's going on with giraffe, but into kind of more of the happy, what are we actually doing to try and conserve these populations? So as I mentioned at the beginning, I work really closely on an initiative called the Twiga Walinzi Initiative. Twiga Walinzi in Swahili means giraffe guards. And this initiative was started in 2016, really in response to those trends that people were noticing about the decline in reticulated giraffe populations. So at the heart of this initiative is our team. We have about 16 individuals now that are all from the communities in which they work. I always grew up loving animals and kind of thinking that I wanted a profession where I could just work with animals and not deal with people. But surprisingly, my favorite part of my job is getting to work with this team. They're an absolutely incredible group of conservationists that just love giraffe, love wildlife, and are just so passionate about conserving the animals in their own backyard and educating their communities about it. So this is just a few of them in these pictures. To the right, in the giraffe suit is one of our Twiga Walinzi at a World Giraffe Day celebration at a local school. But currently our teams are based at 3 different conservancies in northern Kenya. So we're based at a place called Namanyuk Community Conservancy, which is the big polygon, the big green polygon up to the north. It's about 1 million acres. It's a massive conservancy, but it's a really unique landscape. It's part of the Northern Rangelands Trust Conservancy System, which is a group of about 39 community conservancies. And so it's really amazing because you actually have people and livestock living together in this same landscape. It's really different than our second study site, Loisaba Conservancy, which is shown by the green polygon to the south. That's about 56,000 acres, and it's bordered by community conservancies, but Loisaba itself is a private conservancy. So you have employees and conservancy livestock within the conservancy, but you don't have communities living within it. And then we have a third team of conservancy rangers. We partner with NRT at Ruko Community Conservancy. So if anyone has kind of seen the recent stories about giraffe on a boat or giraffe on a barge being moved off an island. It was at Ruco Community Conservancy. And so while it was amazing to be able to rescue the giraffes off the island and get them safely to the mainland, and for kind of more information on that, if you're wondering why giraffe are on an island, there's a ton of resources I can put in the chat. But once the giraffe are now on the mainland, they haven't existed in that area for about 30 years. And so now we're working with the communities to increase their awareness about giraffe conservation and about the population to make sure that once the giraffe can repopulate the mainland, they'll be safe there. And so our goals with this initiative are really to enhance in-country conservation capacity through employment, training, and education. And we're really doing that with our Twiga Walinzi team, our researchers that are at the heart of the initiative, as well as through working with the local communities and local schools. We're also working to fill knowledge gaps for giraffe conservation so we can make better conservation management plans, better informed management plans. Just like a lot of people don't know what's going on with giraffe populations, unfortunately, there's just not a lot of scientific research on giraffe in general. And so that's kind of why it took so long for people to realize that their populations were declining, because there just wasn't a lot of information historically or currently on population numbers, where they're occurring. We still don't really understand their social systems. And so a lot of what the Twiga Walinzi team is doing on the ecological side, on the research side, is really to try and understand these trends, their population, and I'll go into that a little bit later on how they're doing that. But so we can kind of say, this is what we should do to conserve them. And lastly, we're working to protect giraffe in their habitat. It's kind of our main goal, is to protect them, to make sure they can survive and thrive in these rangelands. So one of the ways we're doing that is through this community outreach and education. So our Twiga Walinzi team will go out into these communities and share our research with the communities. As you can see, so this picture to the left, there's actually a mama holding some of the photos that we take from our trail cameras, which I'll explain a little bit more later. But really going out and sharing our results and engaging the community, involving them in our research so they can feel like they're part of the conservation. I mean, it's been incredible to see just how impactful that is and how supportive the communities are and want to save giraffe. As I mentioned, this picture was shown a little bit earlier. So we work really closely with local schools. We have wildlife clubs where the team will go out and hold conservation lessons about giraffe and other wildlife, so kids can be involved really early on. And then this picture to the right is just one of my favorite pictures. So the Moran on the ground, the young warrior on the ground kneeling, it's actually his wedding day. That is Joseph. He is one of the Twiga Walinzi. And at his wedding day, when you get married in Samburu culture, you can have a speech. You can kind of like we do here at weddings, you can speak to all the people that attended. And he brought images and data from our camera traps to share and tell the importance of giraffe. So I just kind of think that's an amazing story about just how passionate our team is about conservation. And then, as I mentioned earlier about pastoralism, the reason working with these communities is so important to our initiative and community-based conservation throughout Africa really is because pastoralism is prevalent throughout a lot of areas in Africa still. So what pastoralism is it's traditionally semi-nomadic herders that will keep livestock. The livestock go into what they call a boma at night, but during the day, they go out with the herders into the landscape to feed. So this is the landscape where we're also seeing giraffe, elephants, sometimes rhino, depending on the area, but kudu, impala. So basically really sharing that same landscape. And in Kenya, pastoral areas are pretty much all of northern Kenya. So this checkered area shows where pastoral communities are, and then the orange area shows reticulated giraffe distribution. So it's especially important for our research with reticulated giraffe to work with pastoral communities and figure out how we can create this culture of coexistence, because as you can see, it's pretty much throughout entire reticulated giraffe range. So one of the ways we're doing that with the Twiga Walinzi team is through conducting human dimension surveys. So we'll go out and ask local community members different questions about how they feel about giraffe, kind of how they feel about conservation in general. And then some really important questions we ask are, have they ever consumed giraffe meat, or have they ever poached giraffe meat or poached a giraffe? But you know, if someone was interviewing me that I knew worked for a conservation organization, I probably wouldn't answer that honestly, because you never know what's going to be done with that information. And so there's different ways that we can kind of ask questions that won't directly implicate the survey respondent, but can still give us information about the prevalence of giraffe meat consumption in the community. So one of the ways we can ask that is, do you know if giraffe meat is consumed in your community? So while it may not kind of show us that that person is eating giraffe meat, it can give us an indication if it's still happening in that area. So we can then identify hotspots and kind of figure out where we may need to have further community outreach and education programs. And so this is one of the maps that we can kind of develop from that information. So the yellow areas and kind of like the darker red areas show where survey respondents highlighted giraffe meat was recording, or where giraffe meat was reported at higher frequencies in certain communities. And so we can kind of go with our team and say, all right, these are the areas where we need to go work in the schools, work with communities, hold more outreach days. And so that's kind of one of the ways that we're working to address giraffe poaching and meat consumption. Something really exciting in a paper that was actually just published by our team today was that we actually found a decline in giraffe meat consumption from the start of our program in 2016 till when we conducted follow-up human dimension surveys in 2019. So that's really exciting. It means that Twiga Walinzi is actually having a huge impact on their communities, which is exactly what we were hoping for. Another way we're really trying to understand this dynamic landscape that's shared between people, wildlife, and livestock is through tracking livestock. So we work with our Twiga Walinzi teams to put satellite trackers on a few different type of livestock. So traditionally in this area, they will keep cattle and shoats, which is a mixed herd of sheep and goats. And then recently, a lot of people have started keeping camels as well because they're really hardy. And as drought conditions have worsened over the past few years in Kenya, camels can really withstand those drought conditions, but still produce a really high quality of milk. And so these are just some maps from a few of the livestock that we had collared on Loisaba Conservancy. And so as I was kind of talking about a little bit earlier with those with pastoral societies, how you see the livestock going out of a boma at night and then back into a kind of a boma or a safe space at night. You can see that in these maps where you have these dark clusters of points. They're kind of going out during the day and then coming back to the same place at night. And what we can do with these maps is kind of look at what we call the spatial footprint of these bomas and understand how far are these livestock going into the conservancy, where are they going during the day? And we can overlay that with our giraffe information, our the other data that we collect from different methods that I'll kind of talk about in a little bit to see if the livestock are impacting the movements of giraffe or other wildlife. Are they having any influence on giraffe kind of avoiding these areas, or maybe giraffe are more active at night when the livestock are back in the boma? And so this is really kind of an important way we can understand just how these animals are kind of coexisting or not coexisting in the landscape. And another way we're doing that is through putting really similar devices onto giraffe. So livestock are obviously much easier to attach devices to. You can just walk up to them and put a collar on. But with giraffe, we needed a way to kind of track their movements, but they have really weird necks And so you can't put a traditional satellite collar on them that would go on a lion or an elephant or a lot of other animals. And so working with Giraffe Conservation Foundation, they developed what we call an OSSA unit, which is right here. It's a small black box that goes on the ossicone of a giraffe. So the ossicones are those horns on the top of their head. And so they're solar powered devices. They're about the size of a matchbox, but they last for about 3 years. And they send data to a satellite you can schedule it however much you want, but we do about once an hour. And so these little units that go on the ossicone can actually send data every single hour, and I can view them on Google Earth here in San Diego. And so it provides us really interesting insights into where exactly these animals are going. And I can overlay that with the livestock data to kind of see how these movements are comparing, and also just kind of gain a better understanding of where these giraffe are going, how much space do they need? Are they going into the community lands, or are they kind of staying in those conservancy lands where there's no livestock? And so in 2019, we attached about 28 units to giraffe across northern Kenya. And so this is just a video kind of showing movements from some of those giraffe, which I think is really, really interesting. You can kind of see some of them move really great distances, and some of them kind of stay in one place. We don't know why, but this is just data that will allow us to kind of investigate those movements and try and understand the reason for more broad scale movements or smaller scale movements. Mainly, so you can see number 3257 over here doesn't move very much. There is a river that runs through here called the Owasso that does provide a lot of water. Could be that this giraffe isn't moving very far because it has nice access to resources. Whereas this giraffe over here, 3628 or 3268, apologies, moves just across the whole landscape, potentially to find water. We don't know why, but another really interesting aspect is this yellow line kind of cutting through the middle is the A2 highway. And so that giraffe is actually crossing a pretty busy highway to find resources. And so another part of this, yeah.
I'm sorry, real quick. There's a couple of questions that popped up, and I wanted to address them while we're on this slide here. So one of the questions in the chat was, how are those tracking units on the giraffe attached to stay on them?
So those units are actually bolted in. So we work really closely with Kenya Wildlife Service and GCF, Giraffe Conservation Foundation. And so they actually design the units to go, so they're kind of attached to the ossicone. And so it's pretty crazy on how you have to get a giraffe to the ground. They're a really, really big animal. You can kind of think about it like a horse or an elephant. If you've ever seen an elephant lay down, it's really challenging for them to lay down. And so the process of getting a unit on a giraffe is really tricky. And so we are currently working on trying to identify different unit designs so that would be easier. But how you get those units on, so you dart the animal, and giraffe have a really weird physiology in general. And the drug that you use to actually kind of knock the giraffe down causes this response in them that makes them run. So they run really, really fast for about 5 minutes, and then they kind of start to slow down. But to bring a giraffe to the ground, as I mentioned, it's really dangerous for them. It's really awkward. You don't often see giraffe laying down, just because once they do, they're in a really vulnerable position. And so we have a team of about 6 people that are on a rope that kind of rope the giraffe and guide it to the ground. And once it's on the ground, the team of vets moves in and kind of places that OSS unit on the ossicone with those bolts. So it's
I was really hoping you would tell the story, because it was the most fascinating part of and you were telling about the blood pressure issue and how you have to, bring them back as soon as they're down. You only have seconds to work with it, right?
Yeah, so that's the other thing is, not only is it just, you know, really dangerous to kind of bring an animal that big onto the ground. But once they're on the ground, they don't often lay completely on their side because their heart is so big and has to pump so much blood up into their brain just to get their brain oxygen, that when they're in that side position, you don't want them in that position very long, because they can kind of, I'm losing the word right now, but basically it's too much pressure to their brain, and so it can actually kill them if you don't get them up in about, 25 minutes is kind of the longest span you want a giraffe down. But when you're out on the field, you aim to get them up in about 8 to 10 minutes. Any longer than that, it is a little bit risky. And so it's really valuable data, but it is risky to bring a giraffe down to the ground, just because they are so unique. So with other animals that you can collar, a lion, you dart them, they lay down and go to sleep, you put the collar on and it's all good. But giraffe make it really complicated for us. But then we get some really interesting data that allows us to kind of make these informed conservation decisions and understand how we can better protect them. So as I was mentioning with this A2 highway, we can use this data to figure out where we should put corridors or speed bumps or underpasses so giraffe can cross the highway more safely. And unfortunately, as highways and roads become more common throughout Africa, this is something that we're really going to have to figure out how to address and how to develop more frequently. And this is just another map kind of showing all of those movements on a larger scale. So Namanyuk, where our team is based, is this conservancy up here, and then Loisaba is a little bit down to the south, and all of those different colors show different giraffes that were collared. So you can see their movements really vary based on proximity to water, vegetation, terrain. So there's still a lot we can learn from these giraffes, and there's still a lot we just don't know. I see a lot of questions, so I might try and answer some before I move on to the next. Oh, and I clicked out of it. The next. Aretha, were there any other questions before I move on?
Jenna, I had just asked if those were tracking the same species or different species, and if you could discern patterns of movement within a species or anything. So that was my question.
So all of the units from both of those maps are all reticulated giraffe. But working with, so it's kind of a partnership. We call it the Twiga Tracker Initiative. So it's a joint partnership between San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance, Giraffe Conservation Foundation, and Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute. And so the bigger Twiga Tracker Initiative does track giraffe across all species. So GCF has been really instrumental in attaching these units to Maasai giraffe in Tanzania, to Nubian giraffe in Uganda, in Murchison Falls National Park. In Chad, there's a few giraffe that have units. And one of the reasons we are trying to kind of create this large scale tracking program is to understand if there's distinction in species or if it is really kind of more down to landscape. But yeah, we don't know yet. Hopefully in the next few years and more data, we'll be able to kind of answer that question. But yes, these are all just reticulated giraffe in this map.
So Jenna,
We do
there
have
is-
a question about, oh, you're back.
Go
Aretha?
ahead. Oh, no,
Oh,
go ahead, Phil.
What species is the Baringo? They wonder if it's a name given to giraffe you see in the USA, or do you know anything about this particular giraffe?
Yes, so Baringo giraffe is another name for a Rothschild's giraffe. So they're the ones that are
Oh.
found near Lake Baringo or Rugo Community Conservancy. So those were the giraffe that were moved off the island, and they would be now lumped into that Nubian giraffe species or northern giraffe. So another way our team is really trying to understand giraffe populations, where they're occurring, is through what we call population monitoring. And so this is when our team goes out into the conservancies, and anytime they come across a group of giraffe, they'll stop and take a picture as well as record anything they can about that group of giraffe. And the reason we take a picture is because every single giraffe, just like our fingerprints, has a unique coat pattern. So we can use these coat patterns to track individuals and ID them. However, I mean, even just looking at these pictures, it takes me a while to kind of find those unique patterns and pick out something to kind of help myself say, no, these are 3 distinct giraffes. So if we had to do that every single day, our team went out every single time we saw a group of giraffe, it would be really, really hard. Our eyes are not that good. But there's a really, really amazing computer vision program that's being developed by WildMe in collaboration with Giraffe Conservation Foundation and San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance, where we can take all those photos from our photo monitoring surveys, upload them onto a database, and it runs them through this computer vision software and basically tells us, yes, you saw that giraffe 2 years ago, it's already in our database. Or no, you haven't recorded this individual before, this is a new individual, we'll create a new profile page for it. So it's a really amazing way that we can keep track of individuals and kind of do these rapid population assessments faster than we ever could before. And so it's called, if any of you want to check it out, it's one of the links that will be sent out. It's called Giraffe Spotter. It's basically a database for all giraffe across Africa. So we use it in northern Kenya, but our partners use it in Uganda. People use it in Namibia. It's used in South Africa, Niger. So it's a really great way to kind of get all of that information as well, and a non-invasive way to study these populations and individuals. So the tracking data provides us with that really fine scale hourly movement data, but the photo monitoring data can still kind of provide some insights just on a larger scale and maybe not as frequently as that tracking data could. But through our teams that are conducting these photo monitoring surveys on Namanyuk and Loisaba, we can kind of get an idea of where most giraffe are occurring. So this big red area up to the north is Namanyuk Conservancy, and then the smaller area down to the south is Loisaba. And so again, those kind of brighter areas, the pink yellow areas, are where our team saw higher concentrations of giraffe. And so we can kind of start to see on Loisaba, they're really favoring that eastern boundary, which we kind of have an idea is because of the landscape, the terrain, what type of vegetation is there. And in Namanyuk, our surveys are a little bit different. So as I mentioned, the conservancy is about 1 million acres, and up until last year, due to budgets and funding, our team was on foot and didn't have a vehicle. So we think, well, we do know kind of a large population of giraffe do occur in the area where we see this hotspot called Sarara Valley. We do know there's a lot more giraffe in the area and potentially occur in other hotspot areas. And now that we have a vehicle, hopefully we'll have a wider distribution of observations. But since they were on foot, they did make pretty good progress. I don't think I would have gone that far if I was on foot in the Kenyan landscape. But another way we're really trying to understand the interactions between giraffe, livestock, and other wildlife and their movements is through these motion-activated trail cameras. So these are cameras that you can attach to a bush or a tree, and they're motion activated. So anytime an animal, person, tree branch moves in them, they'll take a picture. And so it's a really kind of unique way to collect data in the field without having to send people in the field. So we can put these cameras out for weeks at a time and just see the data they collect. They're one of my favorite parts about the program because I feel like you get a little bit of a private glimpse into what animals do when people aren't around. And these are just some of my favorite images that we've been able to collect from those cameras. So this is a mom and a baby elephant in Namanyuk Conservancy. These are just some giraffe in Namanyuk. This was really exciting. So this is a wild dog that showed up on one of the cameras in Namanyuk. And for a while, we thought that wild dogs were eliminated from the region just because of interaction with herding dogs. So herding dogs can bring canine distemper. And when they come into a new area, they can affect the wild dog population because wild dogs are not vaccinated against canine distemper. So we thought they were wiped out, but our cameras actually recorded a few. So it was really great to see those show up on the camera again. This striped hyena at Loisaba Conservancy, they're very, very elusive animals. They're really hard to see. So the fact that we can see them and confirm them on our cameras is really exciting. This is just a really cool photo. Almost looks Nat Geo worthy. And it was just taken from one of those cameras. And of course, baby giraffe are adorable. And this is a Gerenuck, one of the species we see. We do have them at the safari park in San Diego. They are very lanky, tall antelope animals. And then another really cool way we're using this data is helping other NGOs in the region. So this is actually a lion. You can kind of see the collar around her neck. There's an NGO in the region called Lion Landscapes that collars the lions. As I mentioned, Loisaba is kind of bordered by communities. And so the animals can walk out into the community lands, which is fine when you're talking a kudu, a gerenuck, a giraffe, that's not really going to impact people. But when you have lions or leopards walking into these community lands, trying to figure out how they can work with communities to protect the lions and live alongside lions peacefully is really important. So we're able to kind of share the data we get from cameras, as well as they use the tracking data to kind of keep track of those individual lions. So these cameras are not only helpful for our giraffe conservation, but really helpful for other NGOs in the region as well. And then lastly, there's different ways you can help us staff. So one of those ways is through a program called wildwatchkenya.org. This is a really, really cool site. So anyone from all over the world can log on to Wild Watch Kenya, and all of those images from the trail cameras I just talked about are actually uploaded onto this site. And because we collect so much data, it takes our research team a really long time to process. So we put them up here and ask people to help us kind of classify what's in these trail cameras. And so that's the way you take a virtual safari to Kenya and see exactly what images our cameras capture. So all of those images that I just showed were actually found by citizen scientists on Wild Watch Kenya. So feel free to check it out. There's no data on the site right now just because our volunteers went quickly, but in the next day, 2 or week, we should have a whole new batch of images coming up on the site. And it's really cool to know what you're going to see. We have elephants show up on the screen. There's a lot of impala, porcupines. We've had servals, cheetahs, but it's a really great way to kind of help conservation and just get to stare at animals all day. Another way you can help is actually going on Giraffe Spotter. If you end up on a safari in Africa anywhere, you can actually report an encounter of a giraffe. So if you take a picture of a giraffe, you can actually put it into the data giraffe and help us kind of keep track of those individual giraffes. And then you can also go on to our zoo website if you just want more information about giraffe conservation, about the program, different ways you can feed giraffe at the zoo, or just come visit the giraffe herds at the zoo and the safari park. And lastly, I just wanted to highlight that this really is a collaborative initiative. We work with multiple partners and NGOs across the world, as well as a lot of in-country partners in Kenya. So it really is kind of this collaborative, multifaceted initiative. So with that, I'll kind of close, and I think we have time for more questions, but feel free to email me. My email's here, and I think it'll be sent in the follow-up as well if you have any questions or want to know more about the program or how you can help.
Thank you, Stacy. If you want to unmute and ask a question live, you're welcome to do that too, or put it in the chat.
I have a question, Stacy. I travel to Tanzania all the time, and I know that there is a melanistic white giraffe in Tanzania, and I have heard that there is also one spotted in Kenya. Have you seen it? And I was just wondering what species it was, if you have.
I have not seen it. I would love to. There actually was 3 white giraffe in Kenya. They were kind of closer to the eastern side of Kenya by the Tana River. And unfortunately, 2 of those giraffe were poached. I believe it was in early 2020 or late 2019. There is 1 male giraffe though left, and our partners, NRT, actually did affix a collar to that giraffe. So they are tracking it to keep track of him and make sure he is safe. But I believe there's just 1. There was some reports, some rumors that there was another white giraffe spotted in the area as well, but I don't know if that was ever confirmed. But they're on the eastern side of Kenya, kind of a little bit closer to the ocean along the Tana River.
Oh, okay. And one other question, do you ever collaborate with Sheldrick when they rescue giraffes that are injured?
Yeah, so we don't really, I wish I could. I wish I had all the experience to care for an orphan baby giraffe. That would be amazing. But since we're mainly research, we don't. But what's really cool is our Twiga Walinzi team will report injured giraffe or giraffe orphans to Kenya Wildlife Service. And so far, I think we've alerted KWS to about 5 different orphan giraffes. In northern Kenya, they are taken to a different orphanage. There's a place called Sarara Eco Camp, which actually has been really successful in raising orphan giraffes. I think they've successfully rewilded about 7 giraffe now. And so our team is able to work with them to take the giraffe orphans there, and then Sarara can help raise them and eventually rewild them. But I'm not directly involved with that, although it would be.
Thank you very much.
There's a question, how often does your team go to Kenya?
So typically on a normal year, I would go about 2 to 3 times a year to go work with the Twiga Walinzi team. And while I'm there, I bring equipment, we do trainings, I go to meetings. I do a lot of the training and management for the team. So any new surveys that we're doing, I'll work with the team, or if we need to adjust some of our survey methods. And then my colleague, Christy Rupert, who also works for the zoo, she works on the community side. So I'm kind of more on the research ecology side, and she's more on the community side. She'll go 2 to 3 times a year as well to work with the team and hold community days, share the results from our project, as well as train the team on new human dimension surveys or outreach techniques.
Any more questions?
Very enlightening.
So this, when you put on the ossicone, you said there's new methods being developed that are less invasive or whatever. What are some of those methods?
So some of them, we've been looking at ear tags. I don't know if anyone's ever familiar with kind of livestock tags that you attach to the tag or the ear of a livestock, like a big cattle. Those tags are kind of being played around with. So they have little solar panels on them, and you can just use the same kind of hole punch to punch it right through the ear. There's also different methods being tried to kind of put an anklet on giraffe to see if that's a little bit sturdier. So the ossicone units work really well, but because giraffe feed in the trees and males fight with their heads, we lose a bunch of units just because they are feeding in really thorny bushes like acacia. And so as they have their heads kind of into the acacia, the ossicone units will just rip off. Or males fight with them. We see a lot of males in the field that have broken ossicones or no ossicones because when they fight, they break them. So whenever we put units on males, unfortunately, they don't last very long because if they do fight, the units just get damaged. There is another, I believe there's another group trialing tail units. So kind of trialing putting a unit into like onto the tail of a giraffe. And it's all really challenging because the smaller the unit gets, the less data you're going to get. You kind of need a good mix between how can it be small enough that it doesn't impact the animal, but big enough that I won't have to redo this every single year. You want it to last about 2 to 3 years, just to make sure that it doesn't, you don't have to keep bringing the animals down or capturing the animal. So it's a big challenge, and it's a lot of people are working on it with different species. It's not just giraffe that kind of face these challenges, but as technology is improving, we're getting able to kind of develop these tiny units that can send data for multiple years, be solar powered, or have really long batteries. So it's exciting to kind of see how the technology is being developed.
What do giraffe travel in groups, and what is the group called? A flock, a gang, or are they more individual?
Journey.
So the technical term is called a herd. If you look in
Okay.
like a scientific paper, you call them a herd. But if they're called, if they're, oh, I'm gonna get this wrong. If they're standing still, they're called a tower. And if they're moving together, they're called a journey. That's sometimes what you'll hear people refer to them as. But the scientific boring term is just a herd of giraffe. But that's one of the things we're really studying, is trying to figure out, we see giraffe by themselves, we see female groups with calves, we see then, I think the biggest group size our team has ever recorded was 99 individuals together. And then sometimes we see an average of 3. So we really don't know why. Sometimes they're in these huge groups, sometimes they're in tiny groups, and sometimes they're by themselves. So that's one of the main things we're trying to figure out. And one of the cool things about the giraffe spotter database is we can kind of keep track of who was seen with who, to see if there is kind of any certain ties. So if we see giraffe 94 on a given day, we can see if who we saw giraffe 94 with is with the same giraffe she was seen with 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. But that's still something, yeah, we're trying to figure out.
Blue tongues. I've heard that this is to keep them from getting sunburned, that they're blue. Is there truth to that?
It is. I recommend, if anyone has the opportunity, to go to the zoo and feed a giraffe, because it's incredible just how big their heads are and how long their tongues are. And they are purple. They're like a purple blue, and it is to keep them from getting sunburned.
And they're strictly vegetarian animals, right? That they just feed on the top of the canopy of the forest?
They feed mainly on what used to be called acacia trees. Acacia is now only found in Australia, but that's a whole nother debate. I guess they're called something different now. But they do kind of feed on different species of trees and shrubs. They are mainly kind of browsers, so feeding up high in the canopy, but they don't feed to like the extent of their neck. So for a while, people thought that's why their necks were so long, was so they could reach the tallest trees. But a lot of times when you see them in the field, they're actually bending down to get food, or kind of feeding at the mid-level of trees. So they'll kind of feed at varying heights. Yeah.
Okay, it looks like we're winding up our questions here. This has been fascinating. Thank you so much.
Phyllis, there's one more in the chat.
Oh, okay.
One last one.
Aretha, can you find it?
I have it. It says,
Yeah.
can you, yeah, go ahead, Aretha.
Okay, this is from Patty. She said, can you talk about the role of zoos in conservation of these amazing animals and what we can do to support them?
Of course. So, I mean, one of the main ways is just supporting these conservation efforts, or helping out, like on Wild Watch Kenya. So this talk, or this initiative was mainly started by San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance, and it's just one of the many programs and conservation programs that the zoo has. So I can't remember the exact numbers, but I believe we work on something on like 270 different species. And we have conservation programs across the world. We work in the Amazon, we work with polar bears in the Arctic, and then we have a lot of programs here in San Diego or in California with local species. So zoos are really doing a lot more for conservation, and specifically with San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance, that's a big part of our mission right now. And our goal is intertwining conservation with bringing people to the park and the zoo, and how can we use our two front doors to connect people to conservation? How can we use the animals in our facilities to really educate people about what's going on in the wild? And so one of the ways you can support is just by supporting the zoo, getting a membership, or there's a lot of ways you can donate to different programs. So you can go on to San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance's website and find ways to support the giraffe program. And conservation is expensive. It takes a lot to conserve these animals. So definitely supporting the zoo through memberships or donations is one way that you can really help, but also helping with citizen science initiatives or just sharing information about giraffe and what's going on to other people that may not know is also just as helpful.
Great. So I have just a few announcements about upcoming programs, and we'll close it out. This week we have Cecily.
Programs.
Yes, we have Cecily, who is going to on our member spotlight, which will be at 3 o'clock on Wednesday. She's going to tell us about cybersecurity and how we can keep our computers safe. And then we're going to next week, we have a field trip coming up, but it's deadline is passed now, but anybody who's going with us to the museum on Friday, we will be sending out some more logistical information soon, and this is going to be exciting. And then we're going to have our annual business meeting next week, a business meeting which is going to be combined with installation. And Patty is giving us a thumbs up on this. We hope all of our members will join us for this special event where we hear about, I mean, it's especially important this year when we're transitioning back into the clubhouse. So we will have a lot to report on. So it's always fascinating. And we're going to say goodbye to the board members who are rotating off, and welcome the new ones who are joining our board. So this is always a fun time and interesting and informative. So, and then following that, we have 2 more programs at the end of June, the last week in June, to close out our program year, where we will be dark during July and the rest of the summer. And we're going to have a program on art and photography from Lisa Levert, who's going to join us from the Hudson Valley, New York. Happens to be the sister of those of you who know Janice Barquist. And she's going to talk about goddesses on earth. It's fascinating. It's hard to explain, but I've seen the pictures and it's really going to be something very unique and interesting. And then we're going to have the last session of this for the season of our Jeopardy game night, that those of you who have joined us have found this to be lots of fun. And this one is going to be all about men. So if you think you know all about men, you might win a prize for it. So we have a very good time on this event. So if you haven't joined us, have something to look forward to. That's on the 30th of June. And that's it. And then we're planning a barbecue in August. You have to be a member or a guest of a member. And we're going to have a wonderful theme this year on our brand new chef, who has actually been with us, but he's been promoted to our executive chef. He's going to do a Caribbean menu, which is going to be very tasty. And we're having it on a Sunday at 5 o'clock. Did we decide 5 or 5:30? But you'll be getting more information on that. So we're looking forward to, after a year off from this, we'll all be able to get together in person. Okay, so that's it. See you all soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Jenna. Bye, everybody. Have a good night.